Hi everyone, it's absolutely my great pleasure to talk to my guest today, Jim Rogers, and I don't think he needs an introduction, but for the newbies, he's a legendary investor who thinks out of the box, who traveled around the world multiple times, and he keeps his eye open, and I think he really likes to invest when something is cheap. Am I right?
Well, I do try to. I find it a fascinating way to spend my time and to make money. To do success, you have to find things that other people are not looking at.
Yes,
That's what
yes,
I've
yes.
found. I have found when I wander away from the crowd, that's where I find the new action. If everybody's over here doing this, I try to wander over here and see if I can find something new.
Yeah, that's great. And that brings me to the first point and I tell you right away why I want to ask this, and also to be actual, I see the opposite of cheap today, at least in the place where most of the people are looking. For example, would you buy the S&P 500 today?
No, I would not, Peter, because the S&P 500 is near its all-time high. I usually don't like to buy things near an all-time high. The S&P has gone up for 10 years with a major correction the other day, but
Yeah.
basically the S&P has been going up for 10 years, and that has never happened in American history. So I don't see any reason. I know other things that are depressed, I hope, and I'm buying them instead. I'm looking there instead.
And why I ask it, and I tell it with with some irony, but don't you know that this time is different? The Fed can print unlimited amount of money and buy everything. So, of course, it's
I do
sarcasm.
know that that is happening. I do know it has never happened before in
Mhm.
history. But you said interesting things. Yes, but they're not the only ones. If you
Yeah.
go to Tokyo, every day the head of the Bank of Japan goes in and starts printing money as fast as he
Yes.
can. And he buys stocks and he buys ETFs and bonds. Well, I've been buying Japanese ETFs because Japan is down 50% from its all-time high and America's at an all-time high.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Bank of Japan has more money than I do, but I'd rather buy Japan than America because Japan is more depressed.
Yes, and I see that this way of thinking that gives us overconfidence, and I see that really people are buying Hertz and Nikola and so companies like that who already filed bankruptcy, and they jump in a week 400%, 600%. So it it it. it part of the market seems to me in a bubble, and I just wrote a thing about it the other day. So
Well, there is no question that
yeah,
certain parts of the US market were in a bubble and are again. And there's certainly no question that the American bond market is in a bubble. So, yes, but
yeah,
bubbles have happened before. So when you
yeah,
say
many
it's different,
times.
this is a different bubble.
Yeah, it's yeah. This time is not different. We can agree in that. But how do you approach a potential bubble? Not like this, not this one, but a bubble. So I would like to a little bit learn about how you think, because I try to keep it is family friendly. But why do we people suck on this, and why most of the people don't see this, and you do at least most of the time?
Well, one of the reasons I see them is because I read history and I've been
Yeah,
around. This has all happened before, Peter.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
There've been hundreds of bubbles in history all over the world. Every country, every asset class, everybody's had recurring bubbles. But if you look at them, they all look the same.
Yeah.
Everybody says this time it's different. They all say, oh, don't you understand? Those people don't put their trousers on one leg at a time. They're different from everybody else, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
No, I've seen it before many times. I recognize them. I do know that historically, the people who bet against bubbles usually get wiped out or lose money, and then the people who bet with bubbles get wiped out and lose money. The people who believe it, the skeptics know it's crazy. they lose money because they know that they're too smart. And then the other people who believe it's true and believe it's going to last forever, then they get wiped out. So bubbles can be wonderful if you get it right, disastrous if you get it wrong.
Yeah, very dangerous word. This time is different. Most dangerous words ever, and most famous last words, I would say. And
Yes.
and also, how did you teach this when you were at the Columbia and when you were a professor? So do you look at the long-term pattern, or is there a catalyst? I know the catalyst should be important for you, or
Well,
how
yes,
can you
but
be more?
the bubble's already happening
Mhm.
when you see a bubble. I mean,
Yeah,
you can't, if you can see a bubble in advance, you're going to get very rich.
yeah,
Then you
yes,
can buy it before everybody else, and you will get extremely rich if you get out in time. The best people in a bubble are, somebody who's 25, 26 years old. They don't know about bubbles. They think this is normal. They think they're very, very, very smart, and they can make a lot of money. Now, an old guy like me would say, come on, this is insane. But 26-year-olds, they've never seen it. They think they're smart. They think it's beautiful. So in a bubble, you need a 26-year-old. But when the bubble's over, you better not have a 26-year-old, because the 26-year-old is going to lose everything for you.
yeah.
But the only way I know, you can read about them, you can go back in history. There have been many bubbles, many people have written about bubbles. So just learn about them. They're all the same.
Yeah. So we should spend fair amount of time when we learn about investments to study history and study the psychology of bubbles. I think that's very important. And I quote from you because the more certain is something, the less likely it is to be profitable.
Yes.
It's one of your famous. And how do you know when it's time? And it's not too early to jump in? Because yeah, of course, if you know it will be a bubble, then it's less and less certain, and you can make more and more money. But how do you know? You look for
You
a
watch
catalyst.
you watch Financial Fitness. They will tell you. No,
Okay.
as I said, all bubbles are the same. You see people leaving their jobs, leaving their professions to go to the investment world. Everybody believe you go to the doctor and the nurse wants to talk to you about the stock market. Everybody wants to talk about you go to a restaurant and they have the television on watching the stock market. It becomes a mania. They all look the same. Uh, the signs, you just have to be alert to them. And stocks go up every day, or whatever the bubble is. It could be commodities,
Mhm.
whatever it is, goes up all the time. If it goes down, people rush to buy more. It always happens. But again, I want to remind you, Peter, all bubbles pop. All bubbles have always ended badly. And please be aware of that. There are bubbles, they're recurring. Understand them.
Yeah. And I think what you talk about is not predicting really the future, because you can't exactly do that, but preparing for the future. You can know, and it's something from Howard Marks' memo, that it's not about really uh, predicting the future, but you can look at where we are in the cycle, and you can decide, do I want to take more risk or less risk? And that's how you play it, something like that, or
No, I'm not that smart. I just, when I find something that is where I see something cheap, where there's positive change taking place, I do some research, and if it's cheap, I buy it, and then I try to own it as long as I can until there's a new change that's negative, and then I hope I'm smart enough to sell it. No, I don't think about cycles and things like that. But usually, if speaking of a cycle, if things are depressed, you're in a down cycle, and there are a lot of things that are cheap. But no, I'm too simple. I just try to come across things that are very cheap, and where there's a change, and then I buy it. Or if it's very, very, very expensive, I will try to sell it short.
Mhm. And how do you define cheap? Is it that you can buy $1 for 50 cents, or
Well, those are taglines that people use. I mean, if an industry has been losing money and all the stocks are bankrupt or nearly bankrupt, or haven't done anything for years, that's usually a sign they may be cheap. They probably have low PE ratios or low book value ratios, things like that. Uh, the situation will tell me. Just because I see a country that was nothing has happened, and that may mean it's cheap, but that doesn't mean you should buy it, because it may stay that way. It may
yeah,
stay that way for a long, long time. If you'd invested in Hungary in 1956, it was cheap, but you didn't make any money because nothing happened for a long, long time.
long, long time, yeah.
You have to look for something that's changing, that's positive. It's the change which will help make you a lot of money. Fortunately, if it's cheap, and you're wrong, you're probably not going to lose too much money. But if you get it right and there is a positive change taking place, you might make some money.
Okay, and if I may, I would like to talk about some of your mistakes, because we can learn a lot from that. And I read your fantastic interview with Jack Schwager, and I know about the Memorex mistake you made. So it was something like $48, $46 when you bought it, and sorry, when you started to sell it, and then the price something like doubled to 96, and then it went down to $2. And what can we learn from that? What was the mistake?
Well, the mistake I made was not having enough experience and not knowing enough about markets. It certainly helped me learn about markets. What I assumed everybody knew what I knew. I assumed everybody knew this thing was going to collapse. Well, they didn't. And a lot of people do foolish things, or maybe they were smart, and they go up a lot. Stocks can go up a great deal, much more than you would ever expect, especially in a mania or a bubble. And that's what I did not know, not at that stage of my career. I didn't know that people would do foolish things. Memorex collapsed eventually, but I collapsed first because, I didn't know about madness. I didn't have the staying power. I sold it short. If you sell something short, you got to have staying power. Well, I learned a lesson.
And it is because you didn't have enough experience yet. You didn't see these kind of
Well,
things enough times.
That's what I would say. Looking back on it, yes, I knew that Memorex was very, very expensive. I knew that things were going negative against Memorex, but I didn't realize how many people thought this was great and would be great for a while. I also didn't understand there was a bubble going on in the American stock market. Well, I'd never seen a bubble. I'd never seen anything. I didn't. It was my first bubble. I learned about bubbles partly because of living through that first bubble, but I didn't know what a bubble was. That's why I said everybody should read about them or go through them. If you go through a bubble, you'll remember.
Yeah, for sure. And it was still at your early career, so it's 70s or something like that.
It was
And
early in my career.
yeah, and are there any other mistakes you are proud of, if I can
Well,
say that?
I make a lot. You want to hear about my first wife? I make a lot of mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah, for sure.
But hopefully you will learn from your mistakes. I learned from my mistakes in that first bubble that I went through, and hopefully you'll learn from mistakes like that, and things will get better. We could do 3 or 4 hours on my mistakes, Peter.
Okay. And are you more an investor or a speculator? What is the difference for you?
Well, I consider myself an investor. I try to find things where there are good, positive fundamentals taking place, and I try to invest, and I want to own it for a long, long time.
Okay.
I don't. It's because I'm lazy. Partly because I'm lazy, Peter. If I can buy something that I can own for 10 years or 20 years, then I don't have to worry about selling it and jumping around and looking at it every day and every week to make sure. No, I like to find things like that where I can be a long-term investor and just stay with it until the basic fundamental story starts changing.
Yeah.
You know, now you could call me a speculator. I don't, yeah, that could be a speculator. I consider speculators who are more short-term oriented and more in and out kind of people, but you know, we all try to buy low and sell high.
Yes, yes, yes. And it's partially all about timing. On the other hand, you stated many times that you are not good at timing. So,
I'm not.
uh, but still, you have more success than most of the people, I think.
Well, I've had some successes. I've
Yeah,
had some mistakes. Yes.
for sure, for sure. And jumping back to the Fed, how do you see this debt issue in the world? So I think there is nothing new under the sun. We are humans and we have more and more debt again and again, and the government is spending more to make the voting people happy, and then it becomes unsustainable, and we have to inflate this debt away and devalue currency again and again. How do you see this part of the world now today?
Well,
What is
I
your
will
opinion?
say that yes, we've had central banks do crazy things in history, but this, we have never had anything like this, where every central bank in the, nearly every central bank in the world was printing a lot of money and going deeper and deeper into debt. You know, the United States 3 months ago was the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. In the last 3 months, Peter, they've added trillions, trillions with a T of debt, both the Federal Reserve and the central government. We have never seen this kind of debt explosion and money printing ever, ever. In previous times when there's been a lot of money printing and huge explosions in debt, it has always ended badly. I presume this will end badly too. The magnitude of this time around is certainly bigger than anything I have ever read about. But, you know, they've got the printing presses in Tokyo and Washington. There are a lot of printing presses around, and they're all using them.
Yeah, and you feel sorry for the younger generation because
I
we are
do.
the ones who have to clean up this mess. Uh,
Well, this is a good time to be old. I'll tell you that. I got a 12-year-old daughter and a 17-year-old daughter. Boy, I know all people. I mean, even people like me who's old, we're going to have problems too. But young people, I mean, this is going to lead to many, many problems in their lifetimes. And it's going to take a long term. You know, in my lifetime, we had a lot of good times, a lot of prosperity, a lot of expansion. But now it's going to be extremely difficult because the world has never had this kind of debt problem and this kind of money printing ever.
because it's not just the problem of one country, but basically it's a global thing.
As I said, the head of the Bank of Japan goes to work every day and prints money. He said he will print unlimited, that's his word, not mine, unlimited amounts of money. You know, the Bank of England says we will do whatever it takes. They all say whatever we have to do, we're going to do. The Bank of Japan got permission to buy stocks. They couldn't buy stock. Never in history have central banks, legitimate central banks, bought history. They went and got permission to buy stocks.
And of course, you don't think that leads to the great things. Yeah, I completely agree.
Well, wait, it could lead to a bubble. It could lead to a blow off.
Yeah.
Often when you have markets that have been going up a while, and then something like this happens, it leads to a blow off. It leads to a bubble. So yeah, we could have a big blow off. You know, the American stock market's at an all-time high. That doesn't mean it can't go up a lot more if it turns into a big bubble. Likewise, Japan's down 50% from its all-time high. It could go back to its all-time high, and that would be a double.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that we are more rich. And what should we do? Our generation. What do you think? If your daughters start life, so what should they do to prepare if it's possible?
Well, my daughters are very young.
Yeah.
There's not much they can educate themselves, learn, good habits like discipline and do what they're supposed to do. Other people, well, everybody, the main thing you need to learn is don't invest in something unless you know yourself a lot about it. Unless you yourself don't listen to some guy on TV or the internet or in the newspaper, don't even listen to financial fitness. You wait for what you know a lot about. It's the only way you're going to survive, and it's the only way you're going to be a successful investor.
Yeah.
If I told you you could have 20 investments in your lifetime, you would be very careful. You wouldn't listen to hot tips. You wouldn't jump on something you saw on the internet, and you would probably be a successful investor someday.
Yeah, and you would really study what you are buying and why and for what time frame. Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I also really like the idea of traveling and have a look around from the investor's perspective. For example, I live in the Netherlands, as you know, and I come from Hungary. And seeing both sides, I have a better perspective about both countries. And I see many people are pessimistic about Hungary, but in fact, I see Dutch people move to Hungary because it's much cheaper. So it's unbelievable. So
Well, travel and seeing the world is an extremely good education. The more you know about the world, the more you will know about yourself, and the more you will know about your own country if you know about other places and other worlds. So I certainly urge everybody to travel if they can. I've told my daughters that if they go to university, they cannot go to university where we live. They must go far away because that will teach them more than anything in the books. So there's no question that travel and exposure and seeing other ways to think will make you a better citizen, even if you go back to your own country.
yeah, and before we travel to a different country, then we should also learn about its history
Well, you
to
should certainly
really.
do your homework. You can go and say, oh, well, there's the Eiffel Tower. Wow, look at that. But if you don't know anything about France, yeah, you'll see the Eiffel Tower and you'll see the river and you'll see a few things, but it won't be nearly as meaningful for you if you understand why it's there, how France is developed and what's going on.
Yeah. And the other example I would like to talk about is Russia, because you like it now, or do you like it still, or do you like it now?
Well, I haven't sold any of my Russian holdings. I bought more. I bought a Russian. Yeah, I bought more Russian investments recently. Yes, I'm still optimistic about the. Russia's hated. Everybody hates Russia. You started off by asking about buying the S&P in America at its all-time high. Well, everybody's enthusiastic about the S&P, or it wouldn't be at an all-time high. Everybody hates Russia.
Yeah.
I much prefer to invest in a place where everybody hates it.
Yeah. So that's the contrarian thinking. And because, yeah, all I hear is corruption, they steal your business, the military issues, and one central head. But yeah, that's
Well, if that's your view, then don't invest in Russia. Or you have a different view.
Yeah. So you've been there, you looked at it, you learn about it, and then you see, well, if everybody hates it, it must be also cheap, and then you can start looking to investments there. And what are the things you buy there? May I ask?
Well, sure. I own Aeroflot, the airline. I own the shares of the stock exchange. I'm a director of a company called Agro, which is a very large fertilizer company. Mr. Trump is making Russian agriculture prosperous again. What else? I own a shipping company, which I'm buying. I won't tell you the name.
Does it?
I own a restaurant company, which I hope to buy more of. Um, I'm sure there are other things I just don't
Yeah,
remember.
yeah. But just to have a rough idea, that's nice. And other countries you like to invest now?
Well, I mentioned China, which is down a
Yeah.
lot. I mentioned Japan, which is down a lot. I bought more Japan recently. I bought more China recently. Um, I am looking around. I would like to invest in Venezuela, but I cannot because I'm an American citizen, and Americans are not allowed to invest in Venezuela. Whenever a country collapses, it's usually a good time to invest, but Americans are not. I'm a citizen of the land of the free. We're not so free. You can invest there, but I cannot.
Okay. And how do you see Europe?
Well, I love Europe. I don't think, I cannot think of any places that I'm investing in Europe right now. And that's partly because I'm lazy. If you have any suggestions, I'll look at them. But, many European countries have huge amounts of debt, which
Sure.
is getting much worse. They all have a demographic problem. I mean, Merkel in Germany at least is trying to solve the demographic problem, which she's inherited. But most European countries have debt that's very high and going higher and serious demographic problems. And the stocks aren't cheap. If you could show me something that's cheap, I'm certainly willing to think about it.
I think it's cheaper than the United States because more people think that Europe is a mess and the Eurozone has problems and England is leaving, and so it's more a mess. So it must be cheaper, I think, and it is.
Well, I don't know if it's cheaper, but it certainly looks like a mess outside. That doesn't mean, no, I don't mind investing in a mess. Not at
Yeah,
all. I told
yeah,
you about Venezuela. I told you about Russia. I love a mess.
yeah.
But
But if it's really so cheap to be also attractive, despite the mess, that we should talk about later. And how do you see?
Russia, for instance, has very low, it's a Russian, it's hated and it's a mess,
Yeah,
but it's got very low debt, huge assets. So it's different from what's happening in Europe, to
yeah,
me.
in broader terms. Yeah. And how do you see the world changing? How will it look like in 20, 30 years? I know it's a
Uh,
difficult question.
I'm sure there will have been more countries collapse, more governments collapse, probably even war. We've had wars when things get really bad economic times often nearly always have lead to war, and we're going to have some very bad economic times. So I said it's a good time to be old.
Okay, well, I hope I'm getting there. And about China, of course, the Mandarin should be my next language what I learn, I think. Yeah, there is a
Well, I'll
reason.
leave that to you. My children
Yeah,
speak Mandarin.
yeah,
I've spent, yes, I made a lot of effort to make sure my children speak Mandarin. They speak fluent Mandarin and they know
yeah,
Asia. But it's going to take more than that to be successful.
for
There are a
sure.
lot of people who speak Mandarin and English and drive taxis that are, waiters in hotels. So it takes a lot more than that.
But you see, China has a much bigger role in the future, probably.
It already is. I mean, Peter, look out the window.
Yeah,
The Chinese are everywhere. You go to Moscow airport, there were no Chinese there 5 years ago. Now there are long queues because there are all these Chinese. Go to
yes,
Red Square, it's full of Chinese. No, it's
yes.
already happening. They're the second largest economy in the world. Yeah, they're going to have many problems. Everybody has problems. No, well, my children speak Mandarin. We will see.
Yeah. In Hungary, when I was younger, I did not see that. It is not a strong trend yet. But when I moved to the Netherlands, it was shocking to me to see how many Chinese shops there are where I cannot read anything because it's all in Chinese, and so it's unbelievable. So I saw that also, that yeah, it is a trend. So
Well, I will say that Mandarin is a better language to speak than Hungarian.
and China still equals commodities according to you?
you can certainly buy commodities. You can buy, it's difficult to buy them in China. You cannot buy cotton in China, but you can buy cotton outside of China. So you can certainly, China is a major factor in the commodities markets. So you can certainly buy most commodities just about anywhere.
And you recently published books about Japan. And yeah, does Japan do what it's supposed to do to solve the problems?
No, I mean, I love Japan. It's one of my favorite countries in the world. It's such a fabulous place. But the facts are Japan's population has been declining for 10 years and it's getting worse. The debt has been skyrocketing for 30 years and it's getting worse. I mean, Japan's got serious problems coming. I don't like saying it because I love the place so much. But this is not an opinion, Peter. It's arithmetic. The debt, you add the debt, you subtract the population, that's a problem. These are simple facts. This is not some foreigner giving you an opinion. These are simple facts that are getting bad.
Yeah, it's not what you like, but it's the reality what you discover, and you see that the mathematics brings up this.
I don't know I don't know where we will get our sushi in 50 years. You know, it's going to be a big, big problem.
Well, then it's a good time to learn how to make and how to prepare sushi ourselves. And do you still think gold is an insurance policy?
Well, I own some gold. I happen to have some right here. Yes. Gold throughout history, you know, in very bad times, people turn to gold. When the countries collapse or the money collapses, people always, you know, I'm an old peasant. I'm like all the peasants in the world. Academics and politicians can say, don't bother with gold. Let them say it. All us peasants, we know we want to have some gold in our closet or under our mattress when things go bad. So yes, everybody should own some gold and silver as an insurance policy. If you get the timing right, you can make a lot of money as well.
As well, yeah. I see that as well. If I study history and also investments, I agree with you. And what is the future of the dollar?
Well, I own a lot of US dollars. America is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, and it's getting really, really bad. So you probably should now say, well, why do you own the US dollar? I own it because in times of turmoil, everybody looks for a safe haven. People think the US dollar is a safe haven for historic reasons. Plus, many other currencies have serious problems too. The British pound, I mean, they got huge, many currencies have huge problems now. So the US dollar is going to get overpriced in all this turmoil in the next 2 or 3 years, might turn into a bubble, at which point I hope I'm smart enough to sell it.
And I wanted to ask also about the time frame, but you say only a few years.
So, oh no, it's going to happen now.
Different.
We're going to have a huge economic problem in the next 2 or 3 years. Many people are going to race to the US dollar to save themselves. It'll get overpriced. And if it turns into a bubble, Peter, you should know how to watch for a bubble now. I've taught you some of the things that look for in a bubble. And if it's a bubble, sell it.
Yes, I'm also myself very busy with that and learning about that and teach about that. And what is the most cheap asset or assets we can buy today?
Well, as I look around the world, bonds obviously are in a bubble. Bonds are at an all-time high. As I look around, you know, commodities are the cheapest asset class that I can see. You know, agriculture has been a disaster for 30 years. I mean, there are very few. Sugar is down 80% from its all-time high. So most agricultural and most commodities are certainly the cheapest asset class I can find. I mean, other than something like Venezuela, which is a country. It's not an asset class so much, but bonds, stocks, currencies, commodities are the cheapest of all.
I see that also around the world when I travel, that the older generation, they who are in the farming business. They cannot leave the business to their children because the children doesn't want to drive a tractor. But
They surely move to Amsterdam and become stockbrokers.
for sure, yeah. And I think that I can say that show me your investments and I tell you who you are. So our investments should give an answer about answer to ourselves. I mean, the portfolio should give answer to. We should choose the investment tools according to our own fears, to our own beliefs and knowledge, and our own goals. What are the aspects you consider as important when you create a portfolio or how you invest? So how do you do that?
I told you before, I look for things that are cheap. I look for things where there's change taking place, or I look for something that's wildly expensive and where there's change taking place, and I try to sell it short. It could be a new kind of product. It could be a new asset class, commodities. It could be something like that. There's no rule other than if it's cheap and if there's change, then I try to get involved. Or if it's wildly expensive and there's change, I try to get involved.
Well, I think I have to watch the time as well, and it was really a nice interview. I hope you enjoyed it as well. I'm sure our audience did, and thank you for all the wisdom you shared with us.
Well, thank you, Peter. It's been fun. If you ever have any more questions, send me an email.
Okay? I will do that, and have a nice evening.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.